Hello, this is Teresa. This is my second video guest designing for the Hedgehog Hollow using their April 2019 card kit. And you'll see how adorable it is with a totally different style from my first video. So if you haven't seen that first video, I will put a link to that towards the end of this video and as well in the description box below. I'm going to be using the panel you see here as my card as one of the layers on my card, so I'm putting this die strategically in places so that I will have a pattern going across this piece of green cardstock. And if you want to see the first video, I'll have a link to that below. The next thing I'm doing now that I have a pattern all the way across is cutting off the top and bottom edges. And I'm going to also die cut these little birds from these three different areas. This is something I wish that I had not done this way, but I'll explain how I salvaged it at the very end of the video. And I'm going to die cut several flowers out of the pink and yellow paper so that I have enough to have 3 flowers on every stem above. And since it's a little tedious to put glue on the back of each and every tiny little flower, I'm going to use a little crafty helper. I'm using some post-it tape and I'm going to pick up all the flowers and put glue on them. Now, be sure if you do this to make sure that the part you want to glue is facing down so that you're putting glue on the correct side, because if you flip it over, then you'd be putting glue on the side you want facing up. And I wanted the textured part of the paper facing up. Now I'm taking the rest of the stems that came out of this piece of paper, and remember I used 3 of them on my prior card, and I'm using the same post-it tape to hold them down in place while I add some glue to the bottom section of each one of those stems, and I'm going to carefully pick each one up off of the post-it tape so I won't tear them apart as I'm doing so, and I determine where I think they will look best once I place them on the card. Now this is just adding some more interest and dimension to this card without adding a lot of bulk to it. And now that I have that ready, I decided I needed to trim a little bit off each edge because there was something on the edge of one side that was a bit distracting, so I just decided to take care of it right then and there. And now is where I started to fix my issue with the birds that I had die cut out. I have these 2 pieces left of the blue cardstock from my prior video where I made that other birdhouse card, and I'm gluing these strips right next to each other onto another piece of cardstock so that I can die cut each of the birds and have enough paper to cover them. So now that that's done, I'll put the birds aside momentarily while I add some foam tape on the back of this card so that I can pop that up on my card base. So I'm using some different sizes so that I have enough to evenly have enough support on the back. And this is where I bring in the birds again, and I have a pop dot behind each one, and I'm popping them in where I had previously die cut the shapes out. And when I put the sentiment together, you'll see how creatively I handled that part, fixing that too. So I'm stamping onto a piece of white cardstock, and I didn't like the first result, so I stamped it again and then decided which of the 2 I was going to use. And I cut basically a 1-inch square around the sentiment, and I'm using the gold Nuvo pen that came with the kit and adding just a very, very light touch of the gold. And it is not noticeable on camera, but in a still shot I think you might be able to see it better, but it is there, I promise. And I had this piece of golden white twine sitting on my desk, so I decided to go ahead and use that so that I could suspend this like a little sign that the birds at the top are carrying. So I'm using some score tape because it is a very strong tape, and I'm going to use that to hold the twine in place. And I'm going to leave the backing right there. So I decided, or looked at where it would fit the best, kind of in placement, and I decided that since the die cut was already there, I might as well take advantage of it and tuck the twine in behind there and see how that looked. And once I was satisfied with the placement of the sign and the twine, I'm going to glue the twine behind each of the birds so that it stays in place. But before I do that, I'm adding a dimensional pop dot behind the sign and then securing that down. And I'll grab some glue. I'm going to pull out the string and add a little bit of adhesive directly to the string first. And then I'll grab my tweezers and gently pull the bird aside just enough so I can get the twine tucked in behind it. And the last couple of things I'll do is trim off the excess, and since it was still poking out a little bit from the other side, I just pulled it back in. And I'm repeating the process on the other side. And now with just a couple of final adjustments, the card is ready, and I think it turned out adorable. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this video and will consider subscribing to the Hedgehog Hollow monthly kit. Until next time.